How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. I just did a video this weekend talking about some stocks that were going to the moon, and by that I mean they're actually space stocks. And I talked about several stocks in that video, several of which I actually own. And I talked about how they still were beaten down from the last couple weeks, and that I think they had great potential because of ARKX's new portfolio that's coming up. And the interesting thing is, we have major news publications that did articles on these stocks today, and several of them are running right now. So I want to cover that. I want to talk about what they discussed and why I think it's not too late to buy into these, and why I think we could see a lot of green in these in the coming months. So if you guys don't mind, before we get into it, please just hit the like button. I really appreciate that. Now, all these companies I've talked about weeks ago, maybe months ago. So if you guys want to get this information a lot earlier, you can check out the link down below to Patreon, where I tell them exactly what I buy and sell, and you can join the community of over 4,000 other people. There's also a link down there to BlockFi in case you want an interest rate on your cryptocurrency. So the first company today is VACQ, and this one is running more than just about any other stock on my watch list right now. And it's up about 11.5%. We also have HOL stock, and I'll cover the articles here in a second, which is up about 10%. And then we have a lagger, one that I've been buying pretty heavily over the last month or so, probably heavier than any other stock, and it's still sitting at 1066. It's just up 1%, but we'll talk about all those here because we got this news article from Barrons, and this came out, it was updated March 21st, so yesterday at 10:15 a.m. They're talking about how pure space stocks are proliferating and how they seem almost like science fiction right now. There's old space and then there's new space, and they kind of divide it into three different parts. So they divide it here. The launch service is one. These are the companies that launch payloads into space. Satellites is another. These are the companies that have the payloads on their rockets. They put many low-cost satellites in constellations and beam data back to Earth. The third leg of the stool is services. As space grows, the industry needs logistics providers. So you have the companies sending the rockets up, or the launch services, the satellites. They have the actual satellites themselves, and then they have the logistics as part of it. So they have the old space, and then they have the new space. So they kind of break it down that the name of the article is actually introducing the Ford, FedEx, and Microsoft of space. First of all, there's the Ford of space, which they say is Astra. So Astra is merging with HOL stock. It's one that I talked about this last week. This one is running today, but they say that it's kind of like Ford, where you don't need a Ferrari. You just need something that's reliable, that can get it up there, that's cheap, simple, low cost. That's what they talk about here. They make simple, low cost, and small rockets, combining tenets of rocket engineering with the cost and assembly principles of automotive engineering. Astra has some early successes, reaching low Earth orbit in December. The company believes that more than 38,000 satellites will be launched into low Earth orbit over the next decade. And Astra, for its part, will have about $1.5 billion in annual sales by 2025, a company that I own. As an Astra launch will cost roughly about $5 million in 2025, an order of magnitude less than even a SpaceX launch. They also talk about SpaceX in here, that it's valued at about $74 billion as opposed to this company, which is valued about $3.2 billion. They also bring up Rocket Labs, which is VACQ. Now, this is another company that when I heard about Rocket Lab, I actually sold a little bit of my Astra my HOL stock to put in VACQ, and then I put more money in VACQ too. I just want a little bit more exposure there. And they say if Astra is a mini Ford, Rocket Lab is a mini SpaceX. The company not only launches rockets carrying others' payloads into orbit, Rocket Lab can manufacture and manage their own satellites. The company's rocket has a 300 kilogram payload capacity compared to the other one, Astra, which is about 200, I believe. And they go through this company. They project about $400 million in launch sales and $350 million in satellite-based sales in 2025. So they are expecting about $150 million in free cash flow at that time. Now, They also get into the software business. So they talk about Spire Global. This is not a company that I've covered, but they also bring up another company that I talk about which is actually Black Sky. So they say another satellite services company about to become a publicly traded company is Black Sky. This is only valued about 1.5 billion, and it really is 1.5 billion because the stock hasn't moved really. I mean, it actually came down since it was announced. It calls itself a geospatial intelligence company and says it can generate imagery for a tenth of the cost of traditional satellite imagery services. That's a good number that can give many investors comfort that new space-based startups will have ability to disrupt traditional data providers. They plan to have 23 imaging satellites in orbit by 2025, and they project about 550 million in sales. Now, I like Black Sky. I think they're valued pretty low. I haven't looked at Spire that much. And then they actually bring up NPA, which is a company that I talked about in my last video too. And they are going to actually provide kind of like a cell phone service, providing 5G. So they discuss it here. AST isn't necessarily planning to sell customers cell phone plans. They will become part of the infrastructure. So AT&T will use them to improve data coverage around the globe. And then another article actually came out by MarketWatch here. And this is the SPAC with ties to NASA plans to make daily runs to space. So they're talking about Astra here. They have a pipeline of $1.2 billion in contracts being negotiated in areas such as broadband satellites, Earth observation satellites, and satellites that send data to autonomous vehicles. Now, they go through Helicity, VACQ. They kind of break it down how Astra is different from VACQ and Rocket Lab and go into that. So if you guys want to check out this article too, you can definitely check it out. Both of these are just really interesting articles, and I love seeing them actually get more mainstream. They also break down the fact that Astra the CEO has a background in both space and building companies. Kemp was a former CTO of NASA, which is really interesting. They also talk about how the co-founder has already worked with NASA and DARPA and has a doctorate in aerospace engineering from MIT. So both really interesting people in this SPAC, a company that I own. Now, the interesting thing is the large catalyst is actually coming up here soon, which is ARKX. They are planning on releasing this, or at least that's what a lot of people are talking about, towards the end of March. So a lot of people are thinking that it might be March 29 that ARK comes out with their new space ETF. Now, I could be wrong on this. This might not happen. I haven't gotten confirmation from ARK, or I haven't seen any confirmation from ARK. This will be really interesting to see. This could be a huge catalyst for them when they're already getting more mainstream attention right now from Barrons and from MarketWatch. Now, just like any of these stocks, they could actually go down in the short term. I'm not a financial advisor. Also, there has been a lot of volatility in the stock market in general. Over the last couple weeks, SPACs have been hit really hard, but that also brings them to us at lower prices than they were before. I think all these stocks were higher before. None of them are at record highs by any means. So you might want to check these out, especially before ARK releases their new ETF. I think a lot of people will start looking at these companies if they haven't already. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out the link to Patreon to get on these stocks earlier, you can definitely check that out. Again, I've talked about all these in the past, like weeks ago, months ago. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Thank you guys so much. And I will see you guys in the next video. I'll put up the video that I put up over the weekend on these companies. And I'll put up the video on BNGL earnings right here on the end screen. Thanks.